LinkedIn isn't going to love that as a strategy. LinkedIn could do something overnight that starts to ban people who do that. Hello everyone, welcome back to the first Adventures in Networking of 2025. Hi Kelly, how are you?
I'm very well. Hello.
I said that like I don't see you all day, every day.
Well, don't get a chance to talk much, to be fair, so.
This is the only time we ever speak, so welcome to Adventures in Networking. We've got a great topic today. We're going to be talking about this idea that is networking now too slow? Return on investment? Who's got the time to build relationships, long-term relationships? Surely I can just create lead magnets and funnels and social media and use ChatGPT and I can just speed all this stuff up and I don't have to talk to anyone, surely, anymore. Yeah. That's our kind of devil's advocate question, isn't it, Kelly? And I think, well, the first thing to note, it will get more extreme, won't it, in terms of things like ChatGPT. I think Apple's version of virtual intelligence, sounding like an old man, AI is coming. That's going to really popularize it and bring it to the masses. We've got Gemini, which is the Google, or is that, I don't know. See, I am an old man. I don't actually know, but it will start. It does make everything look too slow, when you use something like ChatGPT, doesn't it? And I think, Kelly, it's feeding people's fear that, if I'm moving too slowly, if I'm taking my time, I'm not getting there quick enough and I'm being left behind. What's your view of what's going on?
Yeah, I was literally talking to someone about this morning. It's a similar thing as to we default to that. I'm really busy. I've got so much to do. Oh my goodness, doesn't the time fly? Like, I think we've taught ourselves to be caught up in that speed space, and ChatGPT, like you're saying, or AI has accelerated that because we do get instant results from it. You were resisting it for a long time, and even you've embraced it and gone, oh wow, look at this can really add and enhance to what I'm doing. Of course, not using it as a standalone. So I think that I've even noticed it in myself, waiting for a page to load. I'm gone. I'm off somewhere else. I'm buying something else because the website's too slow. And that, for me, as somebody who is very laid back and relaxed and does sort of have time to be in those spaces, that's kind of worried me a little bit, because that shows me that that's the world we live in now. So, yeah, I think that instantaneous response, result-driven focus is getting more. Not worse, because is it wrong? I don't know, but it is getting more. Yeah,
it's trying to find out what's the truth to what's going on here. How much can we get rid of some of the old ways of working in replacement to a new streamlined way of working? What can we not bother doing anymore? But what is kind of core to, you need this stuff in order to build a business, and we're going to touch on where we think networking sits in this. I think it's really important as well to talk about what is the reality of the promise of a lot of these things that we see, where, you do hear a lot of people, it's like, you can fast track it. What's a classic example? We'll talk a little bit about algorithm chasing. I love the algorithm chasing conversation. You just got to do this, and this is how it works, and I've cracked the code and you're going to get a result.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of know intuitively that probably isn't right, and it isn't right. And then, go on, you were going to make a point there.
Well, I think we do, but I think also there's that, it's almost like buying a lottery ticket, isn't it? Because somebody rides the wave of the algorithm, because we see them, and that might be me one day. And what's going to happen as a result if I do that? So I'm just fixated. It's like that dopamine hit of, isn't it? Oh, is this the post that's going to fly? Like, is that my winning lottery ticket? I think what you have to then do is go, well, what happens if your post does fly? Does that actually result in anything anyway? That's probably the key, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to talk about the kind of reality of using technology as we see it, and then we're going to talk about networking and maybe blending the two. So if you've got any thoughts, questions, we'd love to know examples of either. We are open to this. Like I say, this isn't in any way anti-technology. I'm all for let's embrace the technology that's available to try and work more efficiently, more effectively. But let's talk about, well, let's start on algorithms and social media, because there is a lot in there, isn't there? I think the first thing is that, if you haven't already kind of intuitively guessed this, that the algorithm thing is never absolute. There is no hard and fast rule that will work for everyone on a consistent basis. So you're immediately putting yourself into a space of unpredictability. And you're also relying on something that could change overnight. It's tricky,
definitely.
isn't it?
Very tricky. Before I launch into my thoughts on that, Richard Hyron's popped a comment down. So this is kind of going to lead into what we're talking about now. Human beings checking for accuracy, human beings being involved in conversations, human beings like leading, not the algorithm leading. So I think, Richard, that's a really good point to make. And like you've said, if anybody else has any comments, pop them in. I find the numbers game, the algorithm thing, quite fascinating. I think we all have people that we maybe follow on LinkedIn, Instagram, whoever, and they've got all these followers and they've got all these wonderful posts they put out and they get hundreds of thousands of comments and likes and shares. I think in reality that doesn't happen that often. And I know I spoke to somebody last week who was actually really feeling the pressure of that on LinkedIn. Really, really stressed, becoming a bit burnt out with the pressure of having to keep up with the algorithm because of the curve that they had organically grown and built from a good base, but the pressure and stress that came from the momentum of keeping it there, when in reality it didn't actually bring in that much business. So that was a question between us about whether or not that was a good place to be or not, and could that have been could the prospects come a different way rather than having all that pressure of that algorithm based stuff that she's putting out as content.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because we often encounter people that will say things like, you've got to pay, classic example, even the more moderate people talking about, say, LinkedIn, you've got to post 3 times a week minimum. And I can show you the stats that show you high, but that's not our experience at all, is it? I mean, you're probably the most extreme example, Kelly, in someone that barely ever posts, but when you do, and we've talked about this before, I think it's because you spend most of your time on LinkedIn supporting other people's posts.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn likes you. Yeah. And more importantly, people like you because you've supported them. You are more likely to get support on the posts. We've never found that to be a barrier, have we? To get
no, definitely not. Definitely not.
And also, messaging.
I'm rubbish at notifications on any social media platform. I miss most of the things I'm tagged in, and that's not because I'm not interested. It's just because I just, my brain doesn't work with notifications. It's just the way I'm programmed, I guess. But I think this boils down to that human interaction again. How would you behave as a human? I can't be involved in every conversation everywhere with every contact that I've got at all times. I can't. So that's going to obviously be the same in the online space, isn't it? I'm going to miss stuff. I'm not going to be at the party sometimes. I'm going to be over there doing something else. And I think it's that pressure piece, isn't it, that we put on ourselves to be all singing, all dancing. And I think, how many relationships can you genuinely keep a hold of anyway? So if you go and pass those boundaries of those, the ones that you can keep your arms around, it's always going to dilute as you go outside of that space, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that is a networker's way of thinking about it rather than a marketeer's maybe way of thinking about it. But I think the way to really draw a line under that, and I'm open to, if you've built a method that means just through social media, for example, you get enough business, I'm just a bit skeptical, because if I think about, right, spend time for engagement, post 3 to 5 times a week, that's probably going to equate to a couple of hours a day, and if you think in the scheme of a business owner's working week, that's probably all of your business development time gone like that. So and that's great if you're generating enough business ultimately, but if that activity is not directly leading you to getting enough business, I would question whether, yes, great, you've worked out the algorithm and how this platform works, but if you're not getting enough business, it's shortcutted you to what?
This is quite an timely conversation, isn't it? Because Lisa Yellen, sales coach extraordinaire, has been talking about this month within Only. It depends what you're using that content for, doesn't it? Are you using it to harvest contacts, to gain awareness of your business, just to be in front of people, or are you trying to get prospects, leads generation from it? And I think a real key takeaway when you think about it from a sales perspective is I'm always mindful of not, pestering people. I don't want to get on people's nerves. I don't just want to be on their feed every time they open it. But equally, as Lisa was talking about, you'll never pester somebody if they're genuinely interested in you, whether it's because they like you energetically, they're on your wavelength, they think you're their friend, or you genuinely are their friend, or at some point they're thinking they're going to want to buy from you. So I think we're only going to pester people that don't actually want to be in our space. And that was quite an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll come back to how ways that you can incorporate social media content and activity into a kind of networking workflow. But I think the other thing to talk about, because this is something that's emerged more recently, it's become perhaps the new version of let's find a way to hack the algorithm. I'm speaking to a few people, and you've all encountered them, where, we will use AI to generate content, and then we will use AI and other forms of database scraping to just basically send direct messages, emails to people, and we will go and bring leads in for you. That's kind of the latest incarnation of that fad, if you like. I shouldn't say fad, because I'm sure it does work for some people.
Yeah.
I probably get, I don't know what you all get, Kelly, audience watching, 5 a day probably at the moment, where it's obvious they've scraped my email address from LinkedIn and sent out a speculative email. It's never very good, by the way, is it? As much as people might want to say, oh, we can use technology to tailor it for the person, it's generic rubbish most of the time. I don't see how it works. I'm assuming it must. Well, we're assuming it must work. Because people are paying for it. But I think what you've got to be prepared for if you're going to go down that route is, you need a thick skin, because you're going to get rejected or ignored most of the time, and that takes its toll, particularly if you're spending time or money on that endeavor. I think the way that it can work is if you absolutely definitively know your product, who it's for, and you know how to describe it really succinctly in a way that's going to grab people's attention, for them to go, do you know what? It's really cheeky that you sent that speculative email, but I actually need that thing right now, and you've described it perfectly. Let's have a conversation. That's how I imagine it works.
Yeah.
But are you at that stage where you've perfected what you say, how you position it based on demands of that audience? My guess is for a lot of people, no, because that's really advanced, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, you're doing a lot of guesswork there. You're assuming a lot about someone based on a few lines in a bio, if you've even bothered to look at the bio and not just sent it out. And a lot of people, that works for them, and I'm not knocking any methods at all. If I send enough stuff, eventually somebody will come back to me, won't they? I personally, unless there's there's a couple of things with me. If it doesn't have my name in it, I'm probably not going to read further. If it's got spelling mistakes or asterisks where they've forgotten to delete a line and replace it with something else, I'm not replying to it because I can't be bothered. It's a bot or whatever. But if somebody has bothered to send out something that, like you say, I might be a bit interested, or I might like the idea of what they're selling, and not necessarily for me, but people I know, I'll go back to them and I'll say, listen, I'm not interested. No, but I'm open to a conversation. Because at the end of the day, we're humans, because ultimately somewhere there's a human behind that bot. Of course there is. So if I can get to have a conversation with that person, it's getting past the gatekeeper, isn't it, really? It's a newfangled way of doing that. But it's interesting to me how many people actually, once you've said, I don't personally want it, but I'm happy to find out more for others, they shut the conversation down. And that to me is crazy, because you've actually got some interest out of me. And I sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but I've got a big network. If you want to tell me what it is you do, I'm possibly going to pass that on to a lot of people. So yeah, it's not a method I would take on board myself, But if you're going to do it, have confidence in your product, be able to message it correctly, and be able to answer people if they're going to respond to you, I would say.
You've just described a symptom of that approach, haven't you? People that are doing that don't want a conversation, they want to lead. They want to just bypass the need for a conversation, and they just want to be put immediately in front of a prospect in order to sell at them. And again, of course, that does work to an extent. Cold calling works. I think as a small business owner, I would question, and we've seen this over many years, whether that is an efficient and intelligent way to try and get leads and build your business, because you don't necessarily know what the audience needs. You don't have the time to get rejected over and over and over again. And there is also think about your reputation at that point. You know, do you want to be that person? You can't afford to have a bad reputation, I think.
No, Richard's just popped in the chat there. Yeah, they're sending a negative message, but suggesting that you're not important to them. So exactly. You know, at that moment in time, am I feeling important by having that message land in my inbox? 1% maybe, because it's landed in my personal inbox. It's addressed to me, maybe 1.5%. I'm reading through, it depends if it's relevant to me or not. But to reply and then get a bit of a snub in return, I'm unfollowing that person, I'm unconnecting with them, you know. So a relationship isn't working like that. It hasn't come through on here, but Susan Chamberlain's put a comment on LinkedIn to say that she's also never posted, but she does support other people's posts. So she feels she's a bit behind where technology is concerned. I would say absolutely not, Susan. I think you've probably, you know, bypassed all that tech bit and done the thing that LinkedIn wants you to do. You're having conversations and you're interacting with people. So I definitely wouldn't see that as a negative.
Susan, definitely. Just to underline that, think about this logically. What is the best way for you to get my attention? Is it to post something about your business, or is it to comment on my post? And you know it's the latter. And I think that's exactly what you do, isn't it, Kelly? You spend more time getting people's attention by supporting them, and then they are open to your messaging. There's also a comment on there from Bernie that we need to share about LinkedIn.
Yes.
Let's bring that up on the screen. Yeah, and isn't it, if you are thinking, wow, great, I'm going to shortcut this, I can use AI bots to sell my business, just ask yourself, as Bernie is saying, do you want to talk to a bot? Because that is you are your target audience. You are trying to sell to other business owners, often bigger businesses. Do you think they're more open to speaking to a bot than you are? Of course not.
I mean, use the bots to help you. Like, if you're not good at wording things, if you're not sure how to approach someone, you know, let it help you. It can learn to speak how you speak, you know, and it can help you formulate those messages. But don't rely on it to do the donkey work for you. It's a bit like outsourcing your LinkedIn. We won't go down that road today, but do you outsource it to a VA? You know, does it sound like you? Is it you at the end of the day? Just different thing.
So just, you know, to wrap up this section about the shortcut side of it, there's a couple of things to talk about. Social media platforms, people have said this before, but you don't own that data. It can change overnight. Look at what's happened to Twitter. There's been a mass exodus. The way that platform fundamentally works as a comms tool, completely different to how it was a few years ago. So if you've put a lot of time and investment into that, you're probably going to have to find another route through. And it takes a long time to build, you know, an audience and understanding of how that platform works. Look at TikTok, shut down in America. You know, the people that were making money and probably earning a living off of content on TikTok gone overnight. These are extreme examples, but on a lesser version of that extreme, where these platforms change they don't have to announce anything. They can just change something overnight. And then suddenly what are we getting at? If you try and build your acquisition marketing strategy around worming your way through a platform, it can stop overnight. And then what are you going to do?
Quick fix, definitely. Yeah, you know, they were lucky, weren't they, in the US, I guess, a lot of the influencers, because it came back a couple of days later, didn't it? But it could happen again. So I think, you know, you've got to really work out, how do I transition my audience from that space and put them somewhere that I own, email lists, I don't, your own community, whatever you have. It's not as easy. It's definitely not as easy because the shiny's over here and that's where everybody is. But, you know, there are ways of doing it, the strategies of building on social and then integrating that into the stuff that you owned yourself. So, yeah, one to think about.
We'll come on to that. Well, and the other thing with, you know, for an example, we've talked about obviously people are mining email addresses on LinkedIn and then sending speculative emails. I don't know how, but LinkedIn isn't going to love that as a strategy. LinkedIn could do something overnight that starts to ban people who do that. That's kind of things happen before. These tactics can be shut down overnight. So again, there's a lesson there in putting all your eggs in one basket. I mean, and for you know, fairness, that could also be the same if your only source of business is via one network, for example.
Yes.
You know, if that network closes down, what are you going to do then? So it isn't to pick on, but I think this is the point of going, I can build this engine, it works on this principle and it's going to work forever and I don't have to worry about it. That is something that I think you should question.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if Lisa's just popped into the, hello, Lisa. I wonder if she was here when we were singing her praises just now. Maybe, maybe not, but we did, Lisa, and we're bound to do it again. So there we go.
What's the expression? Her ears were probably burning.
Yeah.
We said awful things about you, Lisa. Definitely watch the replay.
Just to Bernie's other point there, he's never obtained a client that he's not spoken to. He therefore wants to speak to people in the hope that he can help them and their business, and LinkedIn is just a starting point. I have to massively applaud people that get leads through LinkedIn. Okay. If you've had somebody contact you through LinkedIn to say they are interested in having a conversation with you or wanting to think about working with you because of what they've seen you do on LinkedIn, even if you've only ever had one of them, you've cracked it. You really have. Because to be able to take that cold space, show people what it is you do in order for them to then want to contact you to have a further conversation. Don't you just think that's brilliant? And I think that's massively, massively underestimated at how hard that is. So if you've been in that space, pat yourself on the back.
Is it though? Is it? Because how much does it stand out when a human being wants to have an actual conversation with you, as opposed to, oh, hi, great to be connected. I'm expanding my network. Do you want to buy this catalogue of services? That's...
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about those generic messages. I'm talking about, for example, if I've put something out personal about my role as a carer and somebody's direct messaged me and said, do you work with other parent carers? Because I'm a parent carer too, and I really loved your approach and I love the way you came across. Could we have a call? That's happened before. Like, that person's really gelled with me enough to go, oh, do you know what? I really want to be in Kelly's space a bit more. I'd love to spend a bit more time with her, find out more about what she does, further this post, really, and find out more about how we can work together. That's what I'm saying, not the cold calling bit.
Yeah. I'm just saying, as a flip side, I think the cold calling stuff makes the personal
much better
connections more powerful because we're so used to getting kind of generic blanket messages. So okay, definitely. Let's move on to networking. And let's go back to this is one of the kind of devil's advocate questions I've written that I'll ask you, Kelly, because I know people, particularly that are new to networking. So if you're young or you've never networked or you perhaps have a negative opinion of networking, I suspect there's a variation of this comment and thought in your mind. Why bother speaking to people if they can't help you? Like now. Talk about that.
Well, I would argue, unless you genuinely don't get on with the person that you're having a conversation with, everybody can help everybody. Yeah, and
that sounds.
But even goes as far as say, even if you don't like the person, you probably can help them. So whether you want to or not is the issue in that space. We've all got backgrounds. We've all got our own networks. We've all got the tens, hundreds, thousands of people that we're loosely connected with. We've got our little black book of go-to. We've got our corporate backgrounds or our self-employed. We've got infinite stuff going on around us. But when we're faced with somebody, we close our minds and we go, oh, look what I've got right in front of me here. Kelly's the leader of a networking group. She's just going to try and sell me a membership. Well, yeah, okay. But I've had umpteen jobs from the age of 14. I've been parts of myriad networks. Do you know what I mean? The connections I've got that I'm very willing to share are valuable to you if I like you and I can establish how I can help you. That's just me as an example, but that applies to anyone in any industry.
I think you'll also find people go, well, why would I bother speaking to them? Because they're only a one-person business. They're only, they don't run I've got a bigger business with them. Why would I bother talking to them? And that same dynamic applies, doesn't it? We've seen some really like awkward examples of this where people have written off other people. It's like, I only want to talk to you if you run a much bigger business than me and you are my ladder to that next level of my career or building my business or whatever it might be. Anyone else, even if they're on a level with me, and certainly if they're below me in terms of their knowledge or their, the size of business that they've built, waste of time.
Vanity metrics. There we go. That's just kind of size isn't everything. Lisa Kirkbride has just said. Absolutely, Lisa. Yeah, couldn't have. But that's it. Really, that's the answer, isn't it? No. In all seriousness, I'm going to flip that around. Why would big business person want to speak to you? Because you're probably a one-man band yourself, and you're dissing all these other one-man bands that you don't want to be part of, who could actually probably. That pool of one-man band business owners who want to help support and nurture each other grow in the community, only BNI, wherever you go, it doesn't matter, whatever community you belong to, you're going to be surrounded by a lot of small business owners, one-man bands, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, partnerships, whatever, small businesses. If you want access to those big businesses that generally don't go networking, the best way to get in front of them is a connection of somebody that knows said person in that business. And who do you think those people are? They're the people that have come from corporate, that used to work with XYZ, used to be on the golf course with XYZ, are married to the person who works with XYZ. Like, if we're so close-minded to think that because you're a one-man band and you've only been in business 3 months, I discount you, it makes my blood boil. It really does. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to come back to that, but Susan's put a fantastic comment on that I think this is applicable to her industry. So financial services is strictly regulated, as Susan's saying in the comment there. I'll read this out for people listening on the podcast. The FCA are strict on social platforms we use, i.e. we can't advertise on Facebook, Twitter, so we don't have many options. Bernie's kind of put a great response to this, so I'll bring that up on the screen because it does paraphrase. Bernie's absolutely right, Susan. Like I said, the best way to get my attention and stand out against the other people that do mortgages and financial advice that I know is to support me. That's going to make you stand out more than anything you will ever post. Okay, so Bernie's absolutely right. Use it as a way to build relationships. But this is the bit that's applicable to all industries, and it might come as a shock to you. I'm being facetious, but no one goes on social media that wants to read marketing material. Like, it's good that you are not allowed by the FCA to post stuff about, I can do this, I can do that, because it's marketing material. No one wants to engage with marketing material on a social media platform. Doesn't matter how nicely you dress it up. What people respond to on social media is personal stuff, things that are of interest to them, and they respond to people showing interest in them in return. Your biggest restriction is actually your biggest strength, because you can't do the things that will send you down that wrong route.
While you're on that point, because I've worked with a couple of people in a similar space. It was the same when I was in travel. We couldn't this was a long time ago. We couldn't personally put things out. That's changed slightly now, but particularly for IFA that worked with me a few years ago, they decided what they were going to do was just become a bit of a font of all knowledge for their area. So it was Winchester, wasn't it? You probably know I'm talking about, James. He used Instagram particularly to really big up Winchester and the businesses in Winchester, and he would share their posts and their social media, and he would talk about how great the coffee was in XYZ and the meal here, there, or the other. And then every now and again, he would post something about financial, it might be a stat or something. So people knew enough to know that he was an IFA, but he also supported his community. So then when people saw his stuff and they were in the right frame of mind to want to connect with an IFA, they knew that's who he was, and they went to him because he'd shown who he was and he built that relationship.
Great example. Okay, let's come back to this sort of one-dimensional, networking's too slow, can't help me today. Let's talk about referrals, reputation, and how it can take 1 year, 2 months, 1 minute, 20 years to pay off. Talk about that a little bit, Kelly.
Yeah, I think if you are not prepared to build long-term relationships, you do have to question whether networking is right for you to a degree. Because example I would use, a guy, oh gosh, probably met him 8 years ago. I was visiting another networking group, and we got chucked in the visit room together. We got on really well, and in the last 6 months, he's probably passed us about 20 grand's worth of business. I didn't speak to him for probably 3 or 4 years. He reached out. We drove to Exeter to help him with an event that he was doing. Didn't charge him, just did it because we liked him, and play that forward another 3 or 4 years, and he's passing us business, and I'm passing him contacts that he needs as well. I don't know many people. When I say we drove to Exeter, what was that, 2.5 hour each way trip?
Yeah.
Day in, out of the office for no real financial benefit or any benefit to us really, but just to help him. Not many people would do that. So by not doing that, we wouldn't have got this now, would we? Because we would have just shut that relationship down. Now that's quite an extreme example, but we all have our little black book of contacts that we really cherish, that we really love, that we've networked with for a long time. We have the consistency of the conversation. We love their energy. We like being around them, and we want to do everything we can to give them business when we can. Yeah. They are probably people you've had in your sphere for a long time. Not always, because people get replaced, but that's the nurture of relationship building and the consistency.
It's the Jim Culverwell effect, isn't it? So if you don't know Jim Culverwell, where have you been? If you've ever been networking, you must know Jim Culverwell. So commercial property specialist, his thing is that he levels the playing field for people that are taking commercial premises, because they're up against landlords that know all the ins and outs, and he tries to be a bit of an equalizer to make sure people get a good deal, right? Everyone that's ever been networking in the south of England has probably encountered Jim and knows a variation of that. That's what he does, right? So Jim's got two approaches. He talks about the farmer versus what's the other one? Hunter versus farmer. Like, if Jim just went to all networking and went, oh, hello, I don't really care where you are. Do you want my advice on commercial property? No. All right, then bye. And he just did that on repeat, he would have given up years ago, because he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. He might have occasionally someone gone, wow, have you read my mind? I actually do need that help. But the fact that you're quite aggressively not showing any interest in me and you're just pitching at me, the hunter, I'm probably going to be put off of working with you anyway. Jim knows that. Jim is the farmer of networking. So his approach is, I'll tell you what I do. Everyone knows what I do. There's no point in me forcing it upon you, because you probably don't need it right now. 10 years down the line, when you or someone that you know needs help with a commercial property, you're going to think of me. So that's this whole thing about speed and generating a result. Part of this is driven by this. It's not a fallacy or a falsehood, because it can be done. Like, I want recurring revenue. I want a system that's set up that's going to bring business to my door, and I'm going to earn money while I'm sleeping or sat on the beach. That's the cliche, isn't it? And you can absolutely create systems that do that. Networking will do that for you. That's the whole point. If you've put the effort in to build it without you doing anything, suddenly you get a phone call, an email, and someone goes, right, I've suddenly got the perfect person for you, and you've not had to lift a finger. and you've got the perfect connection led to your door. That's the power, isn't it, Kelly?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, are you in business for the next year, or are you in business until your life changes dramatically, or you decide to do something else, sell, or whatever? But I would imagine most people go into business with a view of it's going to be at least 10 years plus. I don't think anybody sets up a business just for a short term. But how are you going to get to that 10 years plus if you don't build those foundational relationships? So many people, I hear somebody go, I tried networking. I did it for 3 months and I didn't get anything from it. And I'd say, yeah, I'm not surprised, because that's not how networking works. If you want to dip in and out, you want to get a quick fix, you want to just see what you can prospect and gather from it, fine. But successful businesses are the ones that are there for the long term, and they're the ones that ride through all of that. And the biggest problem, I think, the other side of that is people leaving network when they're busy. You got busy because you were really good at building all of that stuff. Like, yeah, okay, don't commit to as many one-to-ones and meetings as you maybe would have done before because you're busy, but never let it go, because when you're back out the other side of it, you've got to rebuild all that work that you've just done.
Great point. Richard's point here about unique selling point. It's hard to get your head around as a regulated person, but no one can substitute for you and who you are. That's for a lot of service-based businesses, particularly if you're more of a commodity-based business. I would argue, apart from your knowledge, which is really hard to validate, we assume everyone's got knowledge of the thing that they trade as. Your only point of difference is going to be you and the type of person that you are. That is really going to be the one thing that makes me go, do I trust that person? Do I like that person? Have I got a connection with that person? Therefore, I will give them the business that I don't understand. That's why I'm working with an expert. So I think that's why it's really important to have a network. To be in Richard's industry, Susan's industry, to create that engine that's just going to bring leads to your door, when it is by nature a relationship-based experience, as Bernie's point was earlier. You're not really going to do business with anyone without the relationship first. That's why attempts to build that into a humanless engine is pretty much doomed to fail. I'd love to be proven wrong. And the person that can prove me wrong is going to make millions. Just don't. It's a contradiction. So I can't see that it's going to work.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting. We're all small fish in a big pond at the end of the day, so we've got to show our personality. Yeah.
Just so what we've been at pains to kind of stress there is that networking, it's more about long-term gains rather than trying to cheat your way to a short-term gain. You can win quickly at networking though, Kelly, can't you? So you can have the best of both worlds. What's your experience with how to get business quickly from networking? Any thoughts there?
Reading the room, finding out what the pain points are, adapting your business, your product, services to solve those pain points. Like, we've done this multiple times. We've said about this on previous calls. We re-engineered our whole business based on what we were hearing people talk about in networking. I know a few people that have done that. Being transparent, being open, being able to make a mistake and laugh at yourself and move on, letting people know that you're human. Like, you can win at networking. Yeah, if you've got a clear and consistent marketing message, as in the words of Brian Hilliard, if you absolutely have confidence in your product and you can help people with it, bringing back Lisa, it's not selling it, it's helping people. You are just giving people the option to come to you and find out more or buy that thing. And if you have a product ladder where you go from free to bespoke and everything in between, you will get people along the way. It will be impossible not to. How long that takes depends on the service, the industry, and the need, the desire. But that is possible. That's very possible.
It took us ages, didn't it, with our website business? But we got to a point where, because it was genuine, all of what we said was based on the pain that people have described to us when we asked them about websites. So we'd say, we know business owners get so frustrated by websites because they want to make a change, and they send an email, and then they have to wait for weeks, and then they get charged something. They're being sold services that they don't understand around SEO and hosting, and nothing's transparent. We can solve all of that because we've been through it, and we've built a business that kind of tackles that and gives you the transparency and all that stuff. And you could see we'd almost get messages like in the meeting going, "I want you've spoken my language." I tell you, that's really hard to do by just putting searches in on the internet. To get that level of understanding of, I know what my audience wants and the words that they're going to respond to, I can't think of any other way that you're going to get that level of knowledge without going networking and asking a lot of questions.
100%. Well, I think it got to a point where we ran that business alongside Only in the early days, didn't we? And we actually had to shut that business down because we were getting so much business we couldn't focus on building Only. Now, how crazy is that? You know, we haven't done websites for what, 5 years? Yet we still get people contact us and asking us to do websites because that message was so clear. So again, probably in the first year of networking, those referrals were fewer and far between. Well, I'm saying that. No, I think we got them very quickly because we knew exactly what it was we were talking about. But, you know, for most people, the first year of networking is about building those foundations, that trust, that rapport, like Bernie said. It's not an overnight thing. It does take time. And you do have to almost, you know, sometimes test those relationships to a degree. To really build strong and successful relationships, you definitely do. You know, we've built friendships, haven't we? And we're like, it's not wanting to blur lines because business is one thing, personal is another, and making sure not to use social media to give yourself a leg up when you're with someone else because you're piggybacking off of their stuff. And like, it's making sure that your relationships are authentic and that they're there for the best reasons. So, and that is not an overnight thing.
Definitely. Okay, so if you want quick results at networking, you've got to go into networking with an accessible product that's going to solve a clearly identifiable problem. Okay, yeah. So I'll borrow Brian Hilliard's terminology again. Visible symptoms of a referral. So it isn't, I'm a bookkeeper and I want people whose books are in a mess, because no one's going to tell me that. Give me a visible symptom of a referral that I can listen out for, or that people will identify with, and make it accessible. Because the biggest mistake people make at networking, selling B2B services, is going in and going, well, I do this stuff around coaching and I can help you with this, that, and the other. And if you want to learn more, drop me an email. Like, that's not clearly defined what problem you're going to solve. It's not accessible, and it's based on the assumption that your starting price is going to be about $3,000, because that's what people think, by the way, if you're selling professional services. Whereas if you say, I've got a workshop, you can come along, it's free, I've got a white paper, or I've got some other thing, you know, it's 50 quid. Come and have a look. Let me show you what I can do. That helps validate you within the network, build your reputation. That's how you can fast track your way to getting referrals and business from networking, rather than I kind of do stuff. That fair, Kelly?
Yeah, and I would say if you're sat there thinking, yeah, but what are the pain points? What are people? Ask.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, what do your customers ask you all the time? What do you have on your FAQs? What questions do prospects ask you? You know, what's the question that keeps coming up every time you speak to people? They're the pain point sort of starters, aren't they? And if they're not glaringly obvious, ask people. What, you know, we've talked about this before, haven't we? We had a member who, before actually naming her business and really deciding what it was she was going to do, she'd networked for 6 months to decide what her marketing business was going to be. And she literally spent 6 months just having one-to-ones and asking questions of people. So when you meet a marketing person, what would you expect? What price would you expect to pay? What services would you expect? What sort of levels of service do you expect in response times? All of the minutiae of questions she'd ask people. And then she absolutely nailed it when she launched her product, and she filled it straight away. Funny.
Yeah, there's a big difference. And I think that's a great example of the difference between, you know, oh, networking doesn't work. it's probably because you're turning up, you've got that one-dimensional view of, is the person in front of me going to help me? If not, why am I bothering? And you also don't have that clearly defined product. So, you know, and it's the same, funnily enough, with if you want to build a nice lead magnet feeding into a funnel, you have to have that message and that product right. You can't just say, build, you know, ChatGPT, build me a funnel. It needs something tangible to work with. It can give you suggestions, but you can't beat kind of road testing the response through things like networking. So let's sum up, Kelly. Use networking to test messaging demands, find pain points. Then you can use technology to speed everything up, fast track. But rather than thinking, I'm going to start off with the engine from day one, use the speed of technology to be nimble and just keep trying different messages. What's landing, what isn't, until between, I think the optimal way is kind of between networking and social media and testing response and websites and email and things like that. Use all of them in combination to build a picture to establish what's going to work for you as a business.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, we talked about this just before we jumped on, didn't we? So I want everybody just listening just to think about, what does a networking relationship actually mean to you? What does that word relationship actually mean? It's a bit like success, isn't it? Success is different for me as it is to you. And a relationship can be a different space in that networking world. If a networking relationship is you just picking up my contact details, that doesn't cut the mustard with me. A networking relationship is where you both bother to care enough about each other to further conversations and support and help each other grow. That to me is a networking relationship. Being interested enough to nurture a business friendship, to me, would be a better way of kind of framing that.
It comes down to, are you going to treat the people you meet as peers, as fellow business networkers, regardless of how big, small, whatever you deem to be, are they successful or useful or not? Or are you just going to treat these people as prospects?
Yeah.
Because if you're just prospecting, you are probably wasting your time. You're just going to get very frustrated. Well, there you go. We solved that one, Kelly.
Done. Yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks everyone for commenting. There's been some great stuff going on in there. So yes.
And what does the comments tell you? They're all people that want to build relationships, want to help each other, and are really good in their game. Yeah, they really are. Look, Bernie's summed it up nicely there.
You'll have to read it out for the podcast.
A networking relationship should be 2 + 2 = 5. You plus them equals more success. Yeah, and that number 5 just increases over time, doesn't it, as the relationship builds? Love that. I love that. I think we'll pinch that one, Bernie. Thank you.
I loved that. You sounded like a hobbit then, or Gollum.
Thanks. On that note.
On that note, let's say goodbye. Thanks for watching. This has been Adventures in Networking. See you soon.